Coyote, welcome back to my channel, May Between the Pages. My name is Taylor, and today I have the pleasure of being able to talk to Aubrey from Bookish Blackwell about one of our favorite series of all time, I think it's safe to say, which is The Winnowing Flame. We will get more into the series itself. That's what this whole video is going to be about. But first, I want to give Aubrey a chance to just kind of tell you guys who she is, what she does. Her channel is fantastic. So could you just tell us a little bit about what's going on right now on your channel?
Thank you. I'm so excited. So happy to be here. My name is Aubrey. My channel's name is Bookish Blackwell. Let's see, I've been on BookTube for, I guess, 3 years. I feel like we started around the same time. And I make videos about fantasy and sci-fi and sometimes horror books.
Yeah, and we're basically book twins. We're finding out. Like, we have a couple that we
Yeah,
disagree
I think
on,
we are.
but yeah, we have really similar tastes.
Yeah.
If The Winnowing Flame isn't a perfect example of that. And so I think The Winnowing Flame is one of the first things that showed us that we have similar tastes, especially the Ninth Reign, right? Because
Yeah.
I was screaming about it on my channel, and then I believe you picked it up shortly after that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then you started screaming about it, and I was like, oh, I like
Yes.
this.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. So like I said, I think we started around the same time. And like I've been following your channel for a while. And I remember you posted this like a million years ago, but it was like a get to know me outside of BookTube type of video. And I
Mhm.
remember watching that and thinking like, huh, we have a lot in common. Like I just remember thinking that. So I think this is serendipity.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we got these beautiful broken binding editions of the series. And I had first heard about the series from Elliot Brooks. I think she was like the first person I ever saw talk about the series. And I think Petrick reviewed it, and Books with Brittany. So it had been like kind of on my radar. And I'd been wanting to pick up something next. Like I was like in that phase of like, okay, I need something new to read. I want to start a new series. And I saw your gush review for it that it was your favorite book of the year. And I was like, okay, well, I guess this is what
This
I'm
is
reading
fine,
next.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a very similar kind of before I picked it up feeling that you did. Elliot Brooks was the first person I saw as well who was like yelling about it. And she and I, some of our tastes align and some don't. So,
Yeah.
um, and at that time, I hadn't read a lot of sci-fi, and she talked about that it was like a blend of sci-fi, things like that. So I remember thinking, oh, maybe one day. And then, of course, the Broken Binding edition and the cover with the griffin on it, I was like,
Yeah, the covers are gorgeous. Yeah.
this is calling to me. I don't know why I didn't take them off my shelves. I'll do that at some point. They're so pretty. I have to show them off. But it was calling to me from the shelf. The Broken Binding, one of the things that I really like about them is they're really good about picking series I haven't read yet, but that are very much up my alley.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this was one of those. And then when I started reading it, even the prologue, I was like, oh, I like this. Like when he's like, oh, sister, they've already tried that. I
We've
was like,
already tried that. Yeah.
I'm in. Just so you guys know, we're gonna do non-spoiler thoughts, which is why I'm keeping it very vague right now first, and then we will go into full spoilers. I'll put a little disclaimer, I'll let you guys know that that's happening when it happens. So if you haven't read the books yet, you're still safe. But later in the video, we are gonna go into spoilers. But I guess maybe we should just do a summary of the books and just tell
Okay.
people, if you haven't read them, what are these books about? Which is
What you're in for.
right.
Yeah.
I think you're stellar at describing it because Aubrey did a why you should read video. And when you described the idea, like the story, the base of the story, I think you did a great job because there's so many moving elements.
I know there's so many elements. Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, the way I usually describe it when I start is that it's a world that has a cyclical war that continuously happens. And we enter the story when that cyclical war has seemingly ended, right? So they're called reigns. And the eighth reign, after the eighth reign, finished, the ninth reign has not yet come. So people think
Mhm.
that this cyclical war is over. Would you agree that that's a good starting point, you think?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then we follow 3 characters, right? So I can hand it off to you. Maybe who are our characters?
So we start the story with Tourmaline, who is like this elf-ish race. He's a part of this elf-ish race. They're called Aborans. Aborans, like elves, are beautiful and ethereal, and they love art and they love fine things, and they have long lifespans, and they're a little bit superior and superior thinking. And we have Vintage, who is this
She's a scientist, maybe?
yeah,
A
she's
researcher?
like, yeah, an explorer. She's very eccentric, and she wants to just discover all of the mysteries in this world. And then we have Noon, who is a fell witch, and fell witches in this world create this like winnow fire, Winnowing Flame trilogy. And they create Winnowfire by like leeching the life force out of living things and creating this like magical green fire. So those are our characters, and we're following them as they're like traversing the world of Sarn. These enemies called the Juralia, which are also known as like the worm people, have left these like behemoth ships all over the planet. They're just these like wreckages of these ships, and around the ships is all this weird, creepy wildlife. So things are kind of bulbous and distorted and monstrous. And so
Yeah.
they're just
Quick
like,
disclaimer, if you can't do bugs,
yeah, if you
maybe
cannot
that's
do
the
bugs,
one thing I would say.
don't do it. But yeah, so they're just like going to these wreckages and poking around and trying to figure things out. And it's great. It's just really
Yes.
excellent.
Yeah, it really, really is. And one of my favorite parts as well is when we start the story. There's a lot of tension, like between nations. So I don't want to give away too much of the world building from the beginning because that's some of the best part. But when these rains came down, the Aborans were the only ones who could fight back against the Julia, right? And so when we start the story as well when their god, who usually lent them their power, has seemingly died. And so they don't have this power. Not seemingly died, has died. And so, in order to try to get this power back, have visited atrocities upon people. And so we have these really interesting interpersonal dynamics. I should have done this before live, but we're getting there. Interpersonal dynamics and interracial, intersociety dynamics. I'm even blocking one, whatever. We have those really interesting dynamics going on as well, which is what really drew me in the beginning, because I love me a morally great character. I love consequences for actions, all of those things. And from the very beginning, that's a huge part of this book, I think.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Yeah. Yeah, and it creates a lot of great bickering and banter.
Yes.
That I love.
That's another.
Yeah.
Yeah, the way that the characters interact with each other, like Vintage, I would die for her.
Yeah, I want to be Vintage when I grow up. Like, she is
Truly.
excellent. Yeah. S tier character.
Yes. S tier character is a perfect way to put it. Absolutely. Okay, so now that we've kind of told people the general idea of where they're starting these books, and I've finally put the books themselves up behind me like the professional that I am.
Looks good.
Let's talk about our overall thoughts on the series. So, spoiler free, obviously, for now. But, we both have talked about the first book kind of being our favorite in the series. But we love the series as a whole. So I'm wondering if you have thoughts on either of those, things, like why the first book is your favorite or why you like the series as a whole. For me personally, as a whole, I think that the series does a lot of things that fantasy wouldn't dare do, like classic epic fantasy. because it's a genre blend. Like we're talking sci-fi, cosmic horror and horror elements, a little bit of body horror, fantasy. So I feel like a lot of the choices that are made in the series are ones that I don't see authors make often. And that was so refreshing for me repeatedly throughout the whole series. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think in terms of the first book being my personal favorite, like upon reflection, I think I like it the most just because it hit that like perfect sweet spot of like mystery for me, I think, when we just like had no idea what was going on. We had no idea what anything was. And once that snowball started going down the hill, it was like, oh, okay, I am in for the ride. I just loved that feeling of like falling in love with the characters and falling in love with the story. While I love the second and the third book, and both got 5 stars from me, I don't think either one quite like captured that same like feeling, I guess, but both were good. And I think as a series, it's incredibly good at the things that it does well. I guess I would say. And so I think the things that it does really well are the characters, which are fantastic, the mystery plot elements, the world building.
Yeah.
And those are all just like knockout 5 out of 5 star amazing things. You know, I think book 2 and book 3 maybe show their cracks a little bit and the things that it maybe doesn't do as well. It's like if you love the other things, it doesn't matter.
That's what I was going to say. I agree with you. Like, this is a full 5-star series for me as well. And the only reason that I bring up those other points, or I bring up the same points that you did, is just to let people know going into it, these are the things that are consistent throughout the whole thing. And for me, that was the world building. I think for me, the characters are fantastic, but they're not as strong as maybe like a Stormlight Archive or something like that, because the books aren't as long. And we do spend a lot of time on the world building. So for me personally, the world building and the mystery was the star of the show the entire time. Yeah. And I really liked the technique that Williams used where she slightly expanded the world each book. So we got to do that discovery thing again. It's not like we ever discovered everything. And that was so much fun for me. Like I agree with you. I was down for the ride.
Yeah. And even by the end, like there's still mysteries, like there's still stuff we don't know.
And that's one of the things that I was saying that I think is a choice that not all fantasy authors would make, where I think that was purposeful. You know, Williams was like, you can contemplate, you can figure out what you think is happening. I mean, I'm dying for a novella. Please tell us, Williams.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
But yeah, for sure. So the world building was like a key point for me throughout the whole thing. And also, I just love cosmic horror. So the idea of like this nebulous thing.
Yeah.
I find that authors that can make that creepy, I have a lot of respect for that skill. Because if it's nebulous, how do you make it terrifying, you know?
Yeah.
She did that fantastic.
No, the villains are good. Yeah. Yeah. I as much as I like morally gray villains or like villains that are a little bit complicated, I also appreciate a villain that's just like fucked up and scary.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I think also, you know, the Jury and the Queen is fucked up and scary, but also she makes sense for what she is. Like the more that you find out about her, you're like, oh yeah, that's why that
to her and her motivations.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's not interested in changing said logic, but there is a logic, you know, which I love. I guess the only other thing I can think of that's spoiler free is another thing that I enjoyed. And at the time I found was frustrating, but I enjoyed it overall, is the lack of like the cavalry riding in. Now, I'm not going to say this never happens, you know, so I'm not going to spoil, you know, sometimes we do have those big epic moments that people want. But there were many times where like I wanted that moment and Williams was like, no, that's not what this moment is about. And I think I was just so stressed for my babies, for my characters, that I was like, someone come save these people, because if
Yeah.
something happens to them, I can't. And things do happen to them, of course.
Yeah.
So I think that stress that I was feeling, I wanted her to relieve that in a way that the fantasy genre usually does. And Williams was like, nah, like, I'm not going to do that for you right now.
Yeah, there were a lot of story beats that I was sort of expecting to happen that maybe didn't, or happened in a way that I wasn't expecting them to. And I think also the books have a lot of like, they have a lot more like hopelessness for so much of the time than I think a lot of fantasy writers would lean into, as far as
Mhm.
Williams leans into just like existential dread and just hopelessness and meaninglessness and things like that, that I found,
Mhm.
yeah, very interesting and refreshing. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I think this is a very special series just in its uniqueness and
Mhm.
its willingness to like go there.
Yeah, it's willingness to go there. Yeah. And I think I want to continue a little bit on the topic of themes, which you just brought up, right? So there is this hopelessness in the world, but I would argue one of the themes that Williams deals with is, how do you react in the face of
Yeah.
hopelessness?
Mm-hmm.
And we get to see a whole plethora of reactions to
Right.
that type of situation, right? So I
Yeah.
would say that's a big theme. Do you have any other themes that stick out to you, or not so much? Is it more?
Yeah, I think another theme that is pretty thoroughly explored is like the theme of superiority, I guess, or like
Mhm.
inherent worthiness over other people. Um,
Yes, yes.
and so I think we see that like in the Aborans
Yeah.
and the the
The well, the
Winnowy.
yeah, the Winnery, the
And
Fell Witches as well.
yeah,
Mhm.
so I
Yeah.
think that is like a really interesting part of the series that gets
That's a
more
really good
interesting as you
point.
go. Yeah.
And that goes back to what we said in the beginning, the interpersonal relationships, the banter, you get to see all of these huge societal issues on a micro scale with the
Mm-hmm.
close in, zoomed in view we get of these characters. So she really
Yeah.
does explore this idea of worthiness and all of that through that little micro lens. And then that extends to the macro lens. So, yeah, I agree. Definitely that's a theme as well. So if we haven't sold you on it, we talked about the weaknesses. We talked about maybe you don't want, if you don't like bugs, okay. But but besides those two things that we mentioned, I think that so many more people need to pick these books up. I will be
Yeah.
screaming about them. They're unique, they're interesting, they're doing things that other fantasy books are not doing, and doing them
Yeah.
well, really,
Mm-hmm.
really well. And they're compulsively readable. We haven't talked about that yet, but I could not put this down for the life of me. As soon as I picked one up, no matter how stressed I was, there was only one point where I didn't want to read more, and that was in the middle of the Poison Song, because I was
Mm.
so incredibly stressed that
Yeah.
I didn't know what to do with myself. But besides that,
Understandable.
could not put them down.
Yeah.
I think you read one in one day, right?
I read the second half of the Ninth Reign in one day. So I would say that I didn't have quite that experience. So like picking up the Ninth Reign, there's definitely a learning curve, and there's a lot of world
Mm.
building, and you're introduced to a lot of things, and she just kind of throws you in. So it's one of those things where you're like having to sort of pick up the information yourself and piece things together yourself. Though she does do this cool thing where she will have like Vintage will write letters to her niece, is it? And that's a
I think
really
it's nephew, but
nephew. And that's a really useful way to like give us little info dumps while still being very interesting, because Vintage is such an excellent character that even when she's just like giving you a little history lesson, you're like, okay, tell me more.
I agree.
So yeah, so there's a bit of a learning curve, but like once I hit that middle point, I just sat down and read the whole second half. Like I
Yeah.
didn't mean to, like I didn't mean to, but I
One more
couldn't stop.
chapter, one more chapter. Yep, that
Yeah,
was
yeah,
me. Mhm,
that's the
mhm.
snowball. That's what I was talking about. Just like, oh nope, nope.
And that's why one of the reasons why it swept and took the best book of the year for me last year was just because it had been so long since I'd felt that all-consuming feeling of wanting to be in a world. And when I
Yeah.
wasn't, I was like aching to be there. That's what this series gave me, especially the first book, but the whole series. And that's something that like I had in high school. You know, I'd sit down and binge read a whole series. I
Yeah.
haven't had that feeling in so long.
It's the best feeling.
It really is.
Yeah.
It really is. And I want more people to feel it. So I think we're coming to the end of our spoiler-free section. Just because so many things change in this book, we have to be really careful about what we say here.
Yeah.
But if you know, are still watching this and you haven't read the series yet, I highly recommend that you pick it up, give it a try. I'm telling you, the prologue is so good. It's going to hook you. And you can come back to the comment section here and let us know when you've been swept away by the series. But if you have not read the series, all right, I'm putting up the spoiler button notification on the bottom. All right, run away and come back after you've read it, because we're going to get into our feelings, the characters, all that stuff.
Yeah.
All right, 3, 2, 1. You've had your chance. Here we go. All right. So let's start by talking about Hestilian.
Okay.
Because her plot broke me a little more than a little bit. Talk about hopelessness. Like when we start the prologue with her being this like fiery, the only person that wants to fix things, right? And usually that's like your protagonist, right? The one that's doing that. And then she gets so fucked over. Like she is the only one that wants to save her people. And yet she ends up freeing the Juelia Queen, and then she's never rescued.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So I've actually been rereading it a little bit. Just like every once in a while, I'll like put the audiobook back on and just sort of like re-listen. And I have to say that like through, you know, starting with book 2 with her and Cellophane, and that just being the most upsetting thing, through book 3, there were moments when I was like, you know, watching her do stuff and I was like, I'm not sure that this makes sense. Like, I'm not sure that your motivations like totally make sense to me.
Yeah.
But upon reread, I feel like there is a darkness to her right from the get-go. So it's like, yes, she is the only one who wants to save her people and who's like trying to save her people, but it's almost like at any cost, right? She's willing to really cross lines and do ugly things. You know, like the prologue is literally her murdering
a young boy.
A young boy to try to resurrect their god. And there's another moment where there's like an old dying Aboran, and he's like coughing up blood and all his orifices are oozing, and
the crimson flux.
Right. And he's like on his last legs. You know, he's like, I'm gonna kill one more human being for what they did to us. Like, I'm gonna, I'm so mad at the human race for giving us the crimson flux. And her response is so callous. She's like, well, you could try to go outside, but like you wouldn't get very far. And like, there are no humans for like miles and miles. And it's like, there is a darkness to her right away. And so
I agree with that.
Which was just sort of interesting to see, kind of with that new perspective of having finished the series of like, I think there was
maybe the Juelia Queen let that out. Like she doesn't care for how dark you are or morals, you know? There were that's one of the things that bothered me the first time through, was some of the things that she would do. I'm like, I don't feel like we've done anything to get you to this point. But that is interesting, hearing upon reread that it's already there. Like nothing had to be done. She was just given kind of like free reign to do it should she want to. But her and Cellophane broke my heart. Oh my God. Like that poor creature. You know, as soon as he started eating the pod, I was like, this is going to be awful, isn't it? This is going to be awful. And it's so clearly a foil to what the war beasts are supposed to be. You know, and Williams, again, just doesn't shy away from being like, it can go bad, guys. And it's not going to get, like, I wanted so badly for him to get fixed. But that was one of the things that Williams denies you. She's like, no, some things just don't get fixed. And it's not fair, you know? But him wanting that connection And him and Hestilion too, like their connection was never really love, it felt like.
Yeah.
It was funky, the two of them.
It was funky, yes. Yeah, I feel like at first it was loyalty, like from Hestilion's point of view, but then once she kind of like he disgusted her, like he ended up like really disgusting her, and so she kind of turns her back on him in a way.
Even though she did that to him.
Yeah,
right?
even though she did that, yeah. And she's
Well,
like,
it's kind
"Ugh."
of like when you were talking about how the Oboran was upset at the humans for giving him the crimson flux because
Right.
he genocided all of them and ate them,
Right.
drank their blood. Like, how dare you give this to me? It's kind of
Right.
like that. I just realized that, she's upset at Celephon in the same way that
Yeah.
Oboran is upset with the humans. But yeah, so, the whole crimson flux, we can talk about that. What were your thoughts on that kind of arc of the story?
Well, I found it really interesting, probably because I love when magic has consequences. And I know that's it's not like strictly magic having consequences, but it is how the Aborans get their life energy and their strength at this point without the sap. And so I did find it interesting.
I just realized I spelled spoilers wrong. Don't mind me. I read, I promise. Continue. My apologies.
Nobody noticed. I think the only thing that felt a little weird is that there were like 3 or 4 Aborans left. Like there were only those 3 young Aborans. And I was like, well, shouldn't there be at least a few more?
A few more, or
young people around? Like it's not clear how many Aborans are left.
Yeah, I think for me, I really loved exactly what you said. Consequences for actions. I love magic systems or that kind of thing that has a consequence. So I also adored that. The only thing that really not bothered me, but I felt could have been done a little bit better was when Tor gets it. It's teased for so long and he hides it for so long. And then it gets revealed and again, I love consequences. There was no consequence. It's finally revealed and everyone's like, okay. And then we just move on. And maybe, that was kind of the point, that Tor was making it this big thing in his head, but in the end, it wasn't a big deal. So maybe that was kind of the point. Like he was in a place of safety, but he was still thinking he wasn't, with his friends. So maybe that's it. But for me personally, I was like, we've been teasing this reveal for so long, and okay, that was the only thing that I think I wish might have been a little bit more fleshed out. I don't know how you felt about that, but
I don't remember having strong feelings about it. I do remember being a little bit surprised, even though I shouldn't have been, that he got it. Obviously, I should have seen that coming, but when it was revealed that he had it in book 3, I was like, oh no, not
my
Tor.
baby, right? Yeah. I mean, I think overall, though, the plot was a great, extra dynamic to it. So then I guess let's talk about the Fell Witches.
Love the Fell Witches.
I mean, that plot ended up being so integral in so many ways I couldn't have seen. This was one of the most unpredictable plots to me. We have the goddess who bestowed the fire and all of those different elements coming into it.
Yeah.
And the goddess is an asshole. It was so interesting and so different,
So she actually outright tells us this in book 1. Again, upon reread, I'm like, oh man. So there's a part where Vintage is telling us about the guy who founded the Winnowing. I can't remember his name, but he went to this weird place and interacted with the goddess and came back and was like, oh, Fell Witches are bad news, and started.
I don't remember that little tidbit at all.
I know, I wouldn't have remembered it either. Yeah. And so it was just upon rereading, I was like, wow, this was already here. And I love that feeling of a book a book series already being planned out, just the elements being thought of ahead of time. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I mean, and if you think about it, I'm not surprised that the guy was like, Fell Witches are bad news after meeting the goddess.
Right.
She is awful.
A piece
She's
of
just
work,
like,
yeah.
I'm gonna capture you, one of my prodigies, Noon, and I'm just gonna put you in the middle of a desert and like keep you hostage because I want to. Like we never really figured out why she did that either. Well, I guess we
Yeah.
kind of did because she wanted Noon to understand why she gave them the power.
Yeah, the real power of the power. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, and learning about Noon's story. I mean, we haven't talked about Noon yet.
Yeah.
Right? Like I, being a new mom, okay, I feel for children in stories more than I ever have before. And
Mm-hmm.
just reading about little baby Noon, trying so hard to figure out how to use her power, her mom loving her to the end, like, of course kids are going to get upset. She just wanted to prove that she could use her power, and she
Yeah.
didn't know that it was going to kill everyone she loved. Like, it broke my heart. Like,
Yeah.
a little child walking through the ruins of everything she knew and knowing that she did it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Winnery is the rest of her life. Oh,
I
my God.
know. Yeah. So Vintage is my favorite character, but I think Noon is a very close second, especially
Mhm.
like once the series is finished. Like I think her arc is so special, and I think like the person that she becomes through the series is it's just really nice. Like her arc is really nice. The ending hurt my feelings.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing
Yeah.
full spoilers, right? So when she
Yeah.
sacrifices herself to save everyone, because that's what I'm saying. Like, this book doesn't have those tropes typically. So I wasn't sure if she was really going to do it, because there are so many times where I was like, oh, this is what would usually typically happen here, and then it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
happen. So I was like, is it really going to happen? And then it happens.
Yeah.
She just sucks the life out of the Javelia queen. Yeah, her arc is incredible. I mean, and you can't blame her for being as, not selfish is not the right word. Well, maybe it is, but when she first escapes the Winnowy, all she can think about is her survival. And then to have her
Yeah.
at the end of her arc be willing to do that is
Yeah.
growth, like
Yeah.
huge growth.
Yeah. It's
Mhm.
excellent.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the theme of like worthiness, believing in your own worth and the innate worth that you have as a human is,
Mm-hmm.
that theme is really clear through her.
Yeah.
Because she's been told her entire life she's awful, she's worthless, she's cursed. The Winnowy is just like, when she took down the Winnowy, I was like, this is the Calvary moment.
Yeah.
you know I don't know if you
Agreed.
felt the same way about that scene. Yeah, you
Yeah.
did. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. In fact, like I had wanted it to happen sooner. I was like the second like book one was over, I was like, okay, when are we breaking out
Yeah,
the fell witches? Like get them out of there.
exactly. Exactly. I was like, burn it down.
Yeah.
I did wish that we got a little bit more about the drowned one. I was more interested in that lore.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah, I have that in my notes of like what is her deal? Like why
Yeah, what is
is
her
she
deal?
so scary? How is she Yeah, how does that work? Yeah, because I don't
Like,
think we ever
how
get
is
an
she?
explanation.
No, like, how is she breathing underwater? Like,
Yeah.
it felt kind of like fairy tale-esque to me almost, where you just like have to accept that this thing exists and you're not
Yeah.
gonna know. But that would be an amazing novella. Like, tell me about the drowned one and
Yeah.
what's her deal? Like you said, like, I'm so
Yeah.
curious.
What's her deal? Yeah.
Yeah.
Because everybody's scared of her. So it's like, is she
Right.
powerful or is she just scary, like a matron?
Yeah, is it like a soft power, or is it
Yeah.
like, I can actually fuck you up kind of power?
Yeah.
Because by the time we see her confronted with Vostok and Noon as she's coming into her own, she knows that she is no match for this pair. So she kills
Yeah.
herself instead, right? So I'm curious, like you said, like, what was so scary up until that point? Because
Hmm.
clearly there's a cap on her power. So yeah, I mean, what did you think about Noon and Vostok, their
I
relationship?
love Vostok.
Yeah.
I think of the animal companions, Vostok's probably my favorite. And I love her dynamic with Noon.
Hmm.
I just think is so fun.
I love that she calls Noon Bright Weapon, because she like
Yeah.
knows that is
Yeah.
what Noon is meant to be before Noon knows it.
Yeah.
Vostok knows it. Yeah, I think Vostok, it gives that animal companion vibe that you want, you know?
Hmm.
the comfort and the love there between the two of them. I think it's beautiful.
But then
That was
like,
another. Yeah, go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say, but then, she also has her own personality. Like she's also like, while she is like lovely and tender with Noon, she's also like kind of a brat sometimes, and like,
Oh yeah.
very opinionated, and just has her own. She's not just like a soft, cuddly
Oh no, definitely not.
animal companion that just does whatever you the human say. Like she's got her own opinions and personality, and I really love that about all of the war beasts.
I would not use soft and cuddly for basically any of them.
No,
No,
definitely not.
especially not Kudene. Kudene is like, do not touch me. All right. But I thought him and Tor were a really good match because
Hmm.
they're both so ornery
Yes.
in their own way. And I'm like, yeah, get
Yeah.
a little bit of your taste of your own medicine, right?
Right. Yeah. They both have very like peacock personalities. Yeah.
That was one of the moments that I really wish Williams had given us, though, is the return of some of the war beasts, or the return of their memory, possibly. I wanted to see that
Yeah.
desperately.
So I guess I'll talk about something that I really thought was going to happen in book 3.
Yeah.
So the parasite spirits sort of stop being a thing after book 1. Like we don't really talk about them ever again. And
Mm,
I really thought that once we broke everyone out of the Winnery and we had all these fell witches, that
I
we were
think
going
we had
to
the same prediction. Yeah.
take them to the behemoth wreckage, and they were going to get the war beast spirits and memories inside them, the way that Noon had Vostok in her, and then they would be all powerful, right? They would have
Yes.
that like Juralia fighting
Yes.
power, and I don't know why we
Yes.
didn't do that.
I felt the same way. Thank you. That was a prediction.
I
I was
was
like, oh,
fully ready.
as soon as we figured out that that was Vostok that she took in, I'm like, oh, so then, and then it didn't happen.
Yeah,
And I was
it
like,
didn't happen.
I wanted that to happen. Like,
Agreed. Yeah, because it would have given, because like the parasite spirits are just still out there, I guess.
I guess, or I mean, yeah, I guess.
Are they just like
You're right. I'm thinking,
wandering the earth forever? Like that's so sad, you know? Like I feel like this would have given them, like if we could have
mhm.
passed them into the Fell Witches, at least that would have given them like another.
Yeah, I was really waiting for Vintage to figure that out, or to
Yeah.
like say that they wanted to do that. So that, yeah, that was one of the things that I really wish had happened. But I still think the story is amazing for what it
Oh,
was.
sure. Yeah.
I think she was trying to deny us that Calvary moment, but personally, as a reader, I wanted it desperately. Uh,
Agreed.
but we did have the same prediction.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, I
Yeah.
wonder if she was having trouble thinking of like how she would get the war beast like out of the Fell Witches afterwards, because the only way that Vostok got out of Noon was because Vostok hatched, right? Like a new war beast hatched. And so I wonder if she
Right.
was like, oh well, I don't know, from a writing perspective, like I don't know how I would write the war beast
Well,
like
that
back
was
out of the Fell Witches, but I feel like it could have been done.
well, that was another thing that I was curious about, because Yggdrasil, however you say that, I'm not sure, the tree god,
Hmm.
he is alive again, but he only does the one action where the pods fall once.
Yeah.
And I was kind of hoping we would see them maybe every once in a while. That was another one of those threads that I wish had gotten picked back up,
Hmm.
because now that he's alive, I wanted that to have some other, again, consequences. Yeah, I guess the whole like war beasts not coming back, I wanted that, but I wanted that because it involved so many other things that I wanted to know.
Mm.
Like the parasite spirits and Ixaril and all of that. So yeah, it was probably the one thing that genuinely bothered me about
Yeah.
the rest of it. I was like, I'm not like it didn't matter because I loved everything else so much. But that
Hmm.
one particular plot line, I was like, I wish we kind of
Yeah,
went.
I felt like it really would have sort of given us a full circle moment. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But one thing that I did like that was left open is like the alien things that got stranded on Earth.
Hmm.
I forget their name. Aborans, right?
Yeah, abhorrence
Aborans.
with a capital A. Yeah.
Yes. I think it did. It gave, Tor a taste of his own medicine again there with the hubris. It's like, you're actually not that special. And you meet these Aborans, and this is what you seem like to everyone else. Like the way they're treating you.
So that whole plot line, like the going to the island to find Mikanal, was my favorite plot line of the whole series, just because I love... There's something about like a creepy utopia where like something is rotting underneath that just really tickles my brain. So I loved that plotline. I think it could have played into the finale if Tor had brought that information to Hystilian. Because I think like ultimately it's just sort of left there as like, oh, we're a cosmic joke.
Yeah.
And then it's just sort of like sad. Yeah, it just womp. And it's kind of bleak. And I feel like one way that could have mattered and made a difference is if he had like, I really thought Hystilian was gonna find that out. Either Tor would have told her or she would have found out somehow. And it would have changed her mind. She might have like had a little light switch moment because, she thinks of herself as so superior over humans, and she has such a hard time empathizing with them, that to know that she was in fact descended from humans like might have really mattered to her, like that might have really changed something.
Oh, I agree. One thing I will say is after figuring that out as a reader, it changed the way I viewed her actions. So even though she didn't know and didn't change her actions, seeing the atrocities that she visited upon humans after, like that, again, the kids, the whole varnish scene with the little girl. Oh my God.
Very upsetting.
Oh man. I had to take a second.
Yeah.
And so the fact that she was able to do that, but we know as readers, like that little girl was you, actually.
Yeah.
That really changed. Like, even though her plotline still broke my heart, I had a lot less sympathy for the choices she made after finding that out. So even though she didn't have the knowledge, again, I agree. I thought Tor was going to talk to her about it, but it definitely shifted my perspective. And I was like, oh, you evil now. Like, I don't know if you can come back from that.
How do you feel about her getting to live?
I kind of liked it. Just because, like, she gives me such conflicting feelings, which I think is a testament to the character work that Williams does, because I hate her and also feel bad for her at the same time. So having her live and have to live with the consequences of everything that she's done for the rest of her extremely long, boring life, I'm kind of like, yeah, you deserve that. Like, you didn't deserve a quick death. But also I'm like, so she just wanders around like a ghost thinking about all the horrible things she did. That's all bad. So I'm conflicted. What are your thoughts on that?
I was impressed by the decision. So it was then like the decision not only to kill Noon, a beloved character who's like been on this amazing arc. So to kill her off and then also let one of the bad guys live, and not in a, we'll see you next Tuesday because you're gonna screw us over again, like Saturday morning cartoon kind of way. As in like she just gets to live. Like she
just no one kills her.
Right. Just nobody kills her. And I was very impressed with that decision. I'm definitely conflicted on how I feel about it, like you said, because she is not necessarily my least favorite character. I'd probably say maybe Ninthema is my least favorite character. But
that was another one that never got tied up.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I think this one was purposeful that it didn't, but I was like, you bitch. Like, I don't have any other word. I don't have any other word for it. I understand that you were stuck in this crystal, didn't grow and into a better person in the way that Vintage did. Like, I get that. But there's like no remorse. And then the place that she runs away to, I can't remember the name right now. Oh my God. Why can't I remember anyone's name?
I can't remember names either.
Well, but you know who I'm talking about,
the
right?
City.
So,
with Tyranny.
Yeah.
I don't remember the name of the city, though.
Tyranny, and what's Tyranny's war beast's name? Giant bat.
Like a frosty bat. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, she selfishly helps Tyranny, runs away, and then this is another person who just gets to live. I'm like, I understand Vintage not killing her because Vintage is too kind for her own good. Like, she's not going to go and murder this woman. But I'm like, I mean, can tyranny just have like a misfire and just like
Well,
get
the
rid of
city
her?
got destroyed.
Yeah, true.
So like she could, it's like, we
That's
don't
true. I
know.
guess I didn't get the on-screen revenge, so in my
Yeah.
brain, she's still alive. But you're right; she could definitely have just been in the varnish at that point.
Her betrayal was another moment where I was like, that I was not expecting. I didn't see it coming. I knew that I could tell that she and Vintage were not going to work out. Like I could see that happening, but her actual betrayal, I was like,
Well, I
like
remember the
actual
moment
gasp.
that I figured it out because she was the linchpin point. Because I knew, tyranny something one right. I didn't guess that she was a fell witch. I didn't guess that the story that she told
Oh,
was like,
me
yeah,
either.
I didn't get any of that. But once the younger sister of her assassin was sneaky about getting into the egg area, I was like, oh, they're gonna take the eggs. I was like, but how would all of this be orchestrated? How would it work? And then once I figured it out at the exact same time as Vintage. And I was like, and I think I said that bitch out loud. Like I was so mad.
Yeah. I
when
think I only figured it out when like they mentioned that one of the writers that they were with was a little taller than everybody else, and I was like, oh my fucking god. Like,
no.
yeah, no. Yeah.
Yep. And
Double
Vintage has
cross
spent
Vintage.
and she spent so much of her life trying to find this
I
woman.
know. There's so many devastating things in this series. I guess that's part of what makes it good, but like Jen Williams really wants you to be devastated, like at least
Yes.
a few times a book.
Well, devastated, and also like she's not sorry for devastating you. She's not like, sorry, I'll walk it back. Like
Yeah.
there is none of that. And then that unapologeticness of that is something that I found consistently thrilling, in my sorrow the whole time. Because it's like, no, Williams will do that. And she just won't give you an explanation. She's like, nope, life's just not fair.
Yeah.
This is what
It's
happens.
just not fair.
No.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about our beloved Vintage, shall we? Now that we're on that. She's my favorite character too.
Yeah.
How could you not? Right.
She's just the best. I don't know. Everything about her, just like the curiosity, right? The thirst for knowledge. But just her attitude towards everything.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Just that she's like always at a level of chill that I wish I could also be at.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I found that
she takes
offered
things in stride.
yes, and that
Yeah.
offered me comfort as a reader because if Vintage was there when something was going down, I'm like, Vintage has got this. Like she'll think of something, or if she doesn't think of something, she'll make others, myself included, feel better about what's going on. I was 99.9% sure that if Williams was gonna kill a main character, it was gonna be Vintage. I thought she was gonna nix her, just because I felt like Vintage filled that place of like the Gandalf or like the Dumbledore, or like she was that mentor for Noon and Tor. And so in my brain, I thought, okay, Williams is going to kill my beloved Vintage, but then Tor and Noon, the younger generation, get to take that knowledge and move forward with it. I'm glad that didn't happen, but I was pretty sure that was what the end was going to be. So I was very nervous for Vintage the whole time. Like when she went to Tyranny, I was like, is this the moment? Please don't let this be the moment.
Yeah. So I kind of figured that Williams wouldn't kill her gaze. Like I was like, okay, I think Vintage is safe, and I think Aldasair and Byrne are safe. It's gonna be somebody else. It's either gonna be Noon, Tor, or Hystilian, and I thought it was gonna be Tor because he got the Crimson Flux. So it wasn't like I thought, he was gonna kind of go out in glory like he was trying to do through the whole book. Like he was gonna
and no one would let him. They're like, no, you're gonna live, damn it.
Right, where he got to die how he wanted to, instead of like succumbing to the illness. So that's kind of where I thought it was going. Or I thought Hystilian was gonna have that aha moment, that like light switch moment, and sacrifice herself or die trying type thing, kind of like how Celephon does. But then none of those things. None of
that happened. Then it was Noon.
Yeah.
Well, that's another thing that I think the story is so interesting is both of us had our own view of what we thought would happen, but then what happened like still made sense. There wasn't
Yeah.
like this one plot line that could have worked in this story because there was so much character work and base work done. Like all of this makes sense for the arcs. We just picked the wrong arcs, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
And those classic tropes and like story beats and things like that. Like she really did something else. And like while some of it is satisfying and some of it isn't, I do still appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Aldasair, we haven't even talked about him yet. His story was one of my favorites.
Yeah.
I
He had a
loved
nice arc.
his arc. Yeah. From like, maybe it's because like I'm someone who has done a lot of like managerial duties in my life. So managing other people or making sure things work on the back end so they look good on the front end. Like I've done a lot of that. So when he was like sitting pouring tea, he's like, I'm so sick of tea. You know, like I don't want to do these meetings anymore. But it's because he's drinking tea and having these meetings that the Aborans are still alive. I was like, I see you. Like I get it. Yeah, so I think for him, I felt like I really got his point, his job there. While everyone else is off on an adventure, he's making sure that the relations with the humans are going well and stuff. So, and then when he got burned, when he got like his love, I was like, yes, you deserve it, baby.
Yeah. You do. He does. Yeah. I thought his arc was really, really nice. Yeah. I liked watching him from being this just like sad, ghostly character to
a leader
coming back into the world again. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's like basically the leader of the Aborans now, you know.
Yeah.
Or can't do it. Absolutely not. So Estilian can't do it, you know. So it's him. And he has so much more sympathy for other races than anyone else.
Yeah. A very soft boy. Yeah.
He is a soft boy. And then he gets his warrior boyfriend. And I'm like,
yeah,
you know, Byrne is so badass, but he's also such a soft boy in a way. You know, he's so kind.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Kind, and then he'll fuck you up with axes, you know, like best balance. But I remember that scene when Byrne goes with Aldasair to where they bury the little statues of the war beasts, and it's just such a soft, tender, understanding scene. And that's when I first thought, maybe, you know, I was like, oh, please give us this story. You know, because they're so good for each other.
Agreed.
Yeah, I mean, what did you think of Byrne's story?
I love Byrne, and I love his family and their giant, what are they, bears?
The giant like, wild-touched bears that they ride. Yeah.
I would have loved to spend more time with them because that was so much fun. And the way that they like know he has a crush on Aldasair, and there's a lot of like wink wink nudge nudge, wink, wink. It just goes right over Aldasair's head.
And this is something we probably should have mentioned in the spoiler free thing. I realized that we didn't mention animal companions like war beasts, and we also didn't
because that's kind of a spoiler.
That's true.
They don't come until book 2, so
you're absolutely right. Yeah, there's a reason we didn't mention that. But the other thing that we didn't mention is the queer normativity of it. Like that's something that I really enjoy in my books when it's not a theme. Like it's not a topic. It just is. And this book is so very much that. It just is. Yeah. Like Byrne's parents do the wink, wink, nudge, nudge thing in the same way that you know, a heterosexual relationship would be done, and no one cares about it. And so that's something that I find I enjoy more the older I get, because it's like that can be an explicit theme, and that's something that you enjoy, and that's great for you. But for me personally, where I'm at in my life right now, it's like I know where I stand on those issues and who I am. So it's just like it's nice to just see it there.
To just exist. Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. Yeah. In fact, I keep like so much so that I keep forgetting to talk about like the LGBTQ like representation in the series. Like I forget to even bring that up because it's so normalized. Like it's just there, and it's like you know, if that is a selling point, then I would be happy to sell it to you. But also, if it's not a selling point, like
you don't want it to like keep someone from reading a fantastic story, right? No, I agree. And I forget to say it too for that very reason, because it's just like not a thing. That was another aspect I really enjoyed. There's so much to this story. Like we haven't even talked about it. I know that you did way more awesome prep that I did. So is there any notes or any questions you had that you specifically wanted to bring up? Like,
Let me look, because I have all
so
sorts of things,
much.
but it's all disorganized. Why do
Yeah.
you think that Burns' memories affected the Durilia so much? Because I feel like that wasn't fully explained. Like it's hinted at as to why, but
Mm,
it like completely derails them, right? So
yeah.
I found that kind of curious, and I wonder if like you have any thoughts on why.
I do. I have a couple thoughts. For me, the Jurelia are like, they're clearly bug people. Like that's not a secret. But what they reminded me the most of was ants with the hive.
Yeah.
For me, the way that ants function, right, is because they have like a shared memory, a shared knowledge, and they share that knowledge amongst themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So to disrupt that knowledge would disrupt the flow of food for an ant, would disrupt, how they live and how they function. So thinking along those lines, it made sense that if you disrupt that, that would affect the whole organism. But the
Mm-hmm.
reason I think that Burns thing was so confusing is because he had these emotions that the queen could not fathom.
Yeah.
Whereas she's used to holding a multitude within herself and being all knowing in her life. But this is something she didn't know. And she was obsessed with being in control of that thing. But she couldn't because Byrne, his emotion, I mean, it's cheesy, but I think the way that it was shown wasn't cheesy, if it makes sense. In my summary, it's going to sound that way, but in the book, it wasn't. But like love is something that she
Mm-hmm.
cannot fathom. And so his memory of Aldacer, seeing him for the first time, is what really picked her up because she was like, what is this? Why can't I understand it? Why can't I bring it into the multitude? you know?
Yeah.
So for me, that's kind of the explanation that I had. It's
Yeah.
love. But I don't know if you read something different from it, what your thoughts were.
No, I think that's about what I kind of the conclusion I came to of just like she can't understand it, and her inability, like her need to understand it and inability to understand it is what creates that roadblock for so long of just like, okay, there's been this glitch in the matrix and like I don't get it and I can't get past it.
I think also her concept of time played into it because she is used to being dormant for
Mm-hmm.
centuries. But Hystilian is the one that's giving this, like, we need to attack now. Now is our chance. But for the Jurelia queen, she's like, why? Like, I can live for hundreds and hundreds and thousands of more years. I need to figure this out first. Like, this is my priority. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that contrast was also on purpose to have Hystilian being like, you know, we have to strike while the iron is hot, and the queen is like, no, I don't. I need to figure out what's going on, over here first. I liked seeing the two of them fight though,
Yeah.
like not get along. That was an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, their dynamic was a lot of fun. And so
Mm,
even though, Hestilian kept doing things that I was like, why are
girl,
you doing that? Yeah.
yes,
Her chapters were still so fascinating. Like I was
yes.
always interested in whatever was going on with her on the ship. Yeah.
Hmm.
I really like her dynamic with the queen and I like where it went.
Yeah. Well, I think that darkness that you spoke to in Hystilian, like she was a mirror for the queen in that way. So it was interesting to see two characters who are that morally corrupt is the wrong word, but who are that callous,
Mm-hmm.
interact with each other because they just like skip the niceties all the time and they just
Yeah.
get to the heart of something. So yeah, I thought that was interesting. Did you think that the queen died in the big fire? Did you think that she was done for? Like when they
No,
go down and destroy all the eggs? No. Yeah.
no. Because I was like, there's too much book left
Yeah.
and it felt too easy.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I felt like that was like the eggs are gone, therefore the legacy is gone. Like we don't have to worry about future generations, but we still have to worry about
Mm-hmm.
the one that's here, right?
Yep.
Hmm.
Now there's nothing to lose. Yeah.
Right, and then the queen becomes this gigantic ball mass of goo.
Yep.
How terrifying would that be to see on the horizon? Like talk about cosmic horror, like existential dread, like this screaming mass of chaos. Like,
Those maggots, man. Like yeah. I don't ever
For me,
want
it
to
was
see a
spider
giant
mothers.
maggot.
The fact that something is called a spider mother is
Yeah.
nightmare fuel. Even that name, and then they, like, birth a bunch of eggs. Even
Yeah.
seeing a spider with an egg sac is
Mhm.
I can't in, like, real life. So imagining that giant,
Mhm.
horrific,
Yep.
absolutely horrific.
Yep.
And when you think about how many people really died in this book, like,
So
they are
many.
raising towns.
Yeah. So the very end with the one who laughs, the original
Mhm.
Fell Witch, where she
Yeah.
starts like chiseling away the amber or whatever.
Mm.
Is your
Mm.
inter- is your interpretation that like the people in there are still alive? Is in like why is she doing that? Is it just to clear it away?
I That intrigued me so much. That's one of the things where
Yeah.
I'm, like, screaming, like, "Williams, give us a novella!"
Right.
But I think I thought for sure that they were done for.
Okay.
But the fact that they're frozen in time,
Yeah.
they could be alive. Like, because the Jurelia, like, they subsist off of a lot of this stuff. Like, so what they are is in that. So
Yeah.
could they be subsisting off of that? Which could be such an interesting future novella, like I said, because you could have generations, so many generations of humans coming back. And I get maybe that little girl would be okay, you
Yeah,
know?
maybe that little girl would be okay. Yeah.
And the
So one of
Fell
my
Witch also, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh
Go
no,
ahead.
no, no, finish your thought.
Well, the Fell Witch, the one, She Who Laughs, is also, we don't have a full explanation of her powers, but she wants to be worshipped. This we know.
Yeah.
I think if she could bring people back and then breathe life into them again or be their savior, she would absolutely do that. And she has all the time in the world. Like, she's not going to die, right? So she could chip all that varnish off in theory, you know?
Yeah.
I, I need to know.
Yeah, I need to know. Yeah, so one of the questions I wrote down was, do you want a sequel? Which I think I know the answer to.
Yes.
And what do you think that would look like? Would you want a direct sequel? Would you want like 100 years in the future? Like,
Really good question. I would miss my characters, like vintage and stuff, if we went 100 years in the future, but I feel like that would be where Williams would excel more because the way that she world builds and fills in gaps, I
mhm.
feel like I would be clamoring to find out not just the future, like where the story is set 100 years later, but I would be clamoring to figure out what happened in the past. And she would deliver that in a really interesting, unique way. And maybe we'd get like a cameo with Vintage's letters again or something like that. So I
Mhm.
think while my character heart wants to see my characters again that I love, I think the better choice would be 100 years in the future. Yeah. I think that's where Williams would kill it.
Yeah, I agree. I think I would only want a direct sequel if we were going to bring Noon back. Like
Yeah.
if we were going to find a way to bring her back to life, that's fine.
I don't
But
think
I
Williams would do
don't
that for us, though.
I don't think she would either. I don't
Mm-mm.
think she would. So I don't know that I could handle like watching the characters without her. I
Yeah.
just think that would
Yeah.
feel too sad, like a little too melancholy. But I do love this world, and there are things that we don't know, and so I would love some more answers. And so yeah, either 100 years in
So,
the future or a different part of the world following different characters type
mhm.
thing.
Yeah, I mean, even, like I said, how that if it's a short story between She Who Laughs and the name is on the tip of my tongue, the Winnowing guy. Um, give a short story where the two of them meet. I don't know. There's just so many things she could do,
Yeah.
or the people that are on the island that they leave behind. That
Yeah.
you know,
One of my questions is, do you think anybody went back for Mykonal at the end of the story? Do you think he's just still there?
I think he's still there. To me, it's like he was almost too far gone, like the choices that he made. I mean, he was backing out of the choices in the way that his sister wasn't. But I think, yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. But he was like a huge figure in Emboran society. So trying to rebuild it, having him back
Yeah.
would be significant. And they know where he is. I don't know. That's okay. That leads me to another question. If after all of this, the Eborans do resurge, come back as a race that's flourishing again, do you think Tor would tell everyone where they came from? Or do you think he would take that secret to his grave? Because, like, it destroyed him in a way, but he
Yeah.
was at peace later. I mean, he has a love for vintage as human, right? So
Yeah.
being seen as above her wouldn't be as important to him as it
Yeah,
wasn't.
I think like Iborans knowing where they came from would definitely help change their society going forward and how they treat and interact with human beings. So from that perspective, I feel like he might.
Did he tell Aldasair? I don't think he did, right?
I don't remember.
Because if
If he
Aldasair had that knowledge, he would tell everyone. Like, no question. Like,
Yeah.
get off your high horse a little bit here,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, get off your high horse. Yeah. Because he's not
But
on
if
one. So it seems like it
exactly,
would be much harder for everybody else to hear that news.
that's a really good point. He's not on the high horse to begin with, right? But I think if Tor had that information, it would be questionable whether he would share it. He might not.
Yeah.
Mykonol definitely wouldn't, you know. So even if you brought it back.
But I guess the interesting question is like, okay, so now that the sap is back, could you make another, like, if human beings started drinking the sap,
could they become
in a few thousand years, could everyone be a Boran, you know? Or
And I think Williams would have a good job with that, like gatekeeping who's allowed to become one. Like maybe you have to do X, Y, Z, and then you're allowed to drink the sap. Like there could be gatekeeping.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be interesting. And Williams would kill it. Oh, come on. See, that's what I think what she wanted, though, what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
She's like, you know, there's so many possibilities. Think about them a little bit. I don't know, man. I mean, the human population was decimated during the Ninth Reign, right? Or after the Ninth Reign or whatever. So there would be a lot of rebuilding to do regardless. There's not a lot of people left. My understanding was the Julia Queen knocked out almost everyone that wasn't in the capital of Abora, right?
Yeah, well, we don't have a map.
Yeah, right.
We don't have a map. I don't know if I've ever read a fantasy series that didn't have a map in the front, and I kept flipping to the front to look for the map to see where we were on the map, and I was like,
right.
I don't know where we are.
We need to start a petition for map and spinoff or sequel. Send it to Williams. Pretty please, all right? Yeah, I think, so for me, one of the themes that I would say overall sticks out the most is morality, right? So can you overcome horrible things you've done? Should you be able to? Is it a question of time? Because if you think about it, pretty much every single character besides Vintage has done something god awful. Noon murdered everyone that she knew as a child without meaning to, but she still did that. Tor just, well, I don't know, did Tor do anything god awful? Not so much. I mean, his people did, but he didn't go out and murder. But everyone has like a history of something that they've done that's awful. And so it's like,
well, he left them behind. Like he left the Aborans behind, which I think it ties into his arc of like coming back and fighting for them. So
right.
It's
so
not
it's
god
like
awful, but
yeah, well, I guess poor decisions as well. Should you be forgiven? Can you be forgiven? Even Vintage reaching out a hand to Tyranny, like after what Tyranny did. Vintage is so logical in that she's like, well, this makes the most sense, even though you are an awful person. The theme of forgiveness and its availability and its accessibility, and if it's even on the table, was something I felt came up repeatedly throughout this series. And one of the things that I think made our characters so close is they were able to forgive each other on that micro scale that I mentioned. You know, the human race forgiving Aborans is going to be a long process and maybe will never happen. But on a person-to-person scale, they were able to find that in each other. So I thought that was touching and interesting.
Yeah, you're right. I think that is a pretty heavy theme, especially with Noon. Like I think her ending of having to, you know, run away from this horrible thing that she did to the point of like even suppressing her memories, that she doesn't even remember that thing that she did, to remembering and then, you know, sort of in her sacrifice, like atoning by saving the whole world, and that being like a beautiful gift that she can give back, and making her, you know, worthless life worth more than anybody else's, right? The gift that she could give was, you know, worth so much more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she chose to give it, right?
Right.
Of her free will. So
Yeah.
no one would have made her do that because they had forgiven her. So they didn't see it as she had to make up for anything, you know, in that group of friends. So yeah, that's just a theme that always gets me in books because it mirrors real life in a way that sometimes fantasy doesn't, where it's like, no, I mean, I think one of the bookmarks in Broken Binding even says, name me a society or name me a culture that doesn't have a bloody history. And, you know, we can see that on the micro scale, culture scale, but also personal scale, where we've all made mistakes. And what is the range of forgiveness? Where should it sit? So I was fascinated by that the whole time because she doesn't really give you an answer; she just explores it.
No, and I feel like it's an interesting, like, lingering question with Hestilian still being alive. So as in, like, okay, she's here and probably just like padding around, like, what does her life look like from now on? What does her forgiveness, like, do you think Tor ever forgave his sister? Like, does she ever?
Yeah. I mean, you know, the humans that are left, if anyone recognizes her, understandably so, she would have a target on her head. She should have a target on her head, you know? So it's like, that's going to be, she's caused generational, you know, trauma for so many people. So I don't know, man. So good.
So good. Yeah.
So incredible. And I feel like when I recommend the series to people, I need to always give the caveats that we gave in the non-spoiler section, which is like the things that there might be a plot hole here. There might be, you know, something that's not followed through there. But the things that are done well are done so incredibly well that it's just like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. It doesn't matter. Yeah, it's so good. Yeah. I think probably the thing with the series that people might not like is that it's weird. Like, I think that would probably be the biggest thing, the biggest hurdle. That, like, it is a fantasy sci-fi blend, and I do think that, like, for some people that is just like too weird.
Yeah, I mean, the horror element to do, you know, it's odd. Yeah. And you have to be willing to go along with it. So
yeah, you have to be willing to go along with it, and especially like the reveals in book 2 and book 3, like how sci-fi they become. Yeah.
I mean, basically, the Jurelia are intergalactic parasites.
Yes. Yeah.
That take over worlds and destroy them and move on to the next one. Like, that is very sci-fi. So, and so if you think about it, Noon didn't just save the world; she saved worlds because now the Jurelia can't move on to their next target. So ugh, they're so gross. So we talked about how there's so much in this series, right? And one of the things that we still haven't talked about that I found really interesting were the Winnow reagents. So we have this awful place where people put these fell witches for the rest of their life. And in order to keep this place running and keep that much power in check, you have to have people at the top that have that power, that can control that power. So there are certain fell witches who are trusted to be an agent, right? And I found kind of the case study of all these different agents to be so interesting. We talked about Tyranny. She has just lost the plot, you know, from the beginning.
Yeah.
But then we have, in the first one, Agent Lynn, who has also kind of lost the plot, but because they're threatening her with her child, right, which is awful. But then we have Chen Lo, who in the end ends up being with our baby Vintage, as she deserves. But she was such an interesting character to delve into because by necessity, she did some pretty terrible things, but tried to find little kindnesses in there.
Yeah.
So that goes with that theme of forgiveness as well, or redemption. I loved Chen Lo. I thought that she was a fantastic character. And I loved her reflections back on her time as an agent and seeing the little things that she tried to do, even if from the outside she looked just as bad.
Yeah.
Did you have any thoughts on the agents and like the space that they occupied in the world?
Yeah, well, I found that whole system to be very interesting because I guess my question is like, how would you start something like that? I mean, again, I've been rereading them. So like the Winnery started off as like a safe haven. So as in like the Fell Witches were
Mm-mm-mm.
coming on their own volition, and then it slowly kind of became a prison. And so I guess you would have had some loyal.
Thomas. I just remembered the name of the
Oh
guy.
yes, Tomas. Yeah.
Thomas.
Yeah. Sorry, I listened to the audiobook, so I have all that pronunciation in my head. But yeah, so like I guess you would have had some loyal Fell Witches that you could have then sort of corrupted to your way of thinking. Because the ultimate question is that like none of the nunnery women have any actual power. So it's in like, how do you control these women who do have power? Like you can't keep them in check unless you have other witches that are like utterly loyal. So that's how it has to work, which is really interesting because it means that, you know, if they could just rebel, like it would be game over, but they don't because they're scared and they're scared of other agents, right? And so like
Right.
being afraid of the power of other agents sort of keeps them in check. And I think what I found the most interesting about Chenlo is that she had this point of view of the Winnow being almost like a necessary evil. Like I think she was kind of like, you know, the Winnery's not a great place, but like these women are dangerous. Like they are
Mm-hmm.
inherently dangerous, and there's currently no good systems in place to like keep them in check. And so
Right.
like we are doing a service to society type thing. And like I did find that very interesting, especially like being a Fell Witch herself,
Yeah.
and you know, her reservations of when the Fell Witches became liberated, right? You know, being
Yeah.
like, well, maybe this isn't a great idea to just have all these
Yeah.
women, yeah, who have no
Well,
control
that
of their
is one
power.
thing that made me love her so much is she's the only person who thought about the individual witches.
Yeah,
Like Noon went in and just destroyed the system and said, "My job is done." But
yeah.
Chenlo was the one like, okay, but there are these women who don't know how to function. They don't
And
have
they have no
homes. They don't.
homes. Yeah,
They
they can't
have
go back.
a trauma. Their entire life has been trauma. They've been betrayed.
Yeah,
Like they had to have been betrayed by their families for us to find them. Like their families literally gave them up to a life of being a slave and in
yeah.
prison. So she's the only one who actually thought about them, and that was what
Mm-hmm.
made me really love her, because it's
Yeah,
almost like a chicken or the egg situation, because these women are dangerous, but are they dangerous because no one is teaching them,
right.
because like there is no place for them to go. So part of me was like, if the Winnery was just like a magic school
Yeah,
that
a
taught you how
school.
to
Yeah, an
control it,
academy. Right.
right, send them there once your daughter manifests the Winnow Flame, and then they learn how to control it, and then there are jobs that they can do, and like it's like so close to being useful. So
Right.
there's the chicken or the egg situation here.
Yeah.
But I do think that might have been a bit of a commentary, because this is another thing that I don't mention, in case there's someone out there who's like, I don't want to read about that. But I do think that there were a lot of feminist themes also with the Winnowy, because it's like
Mm-hmm.
women's innate power is demonized rather than seen as something to learn to develop, and not necessarily control, but develop, control, and live with. It's seen as something to be squashed
Yeah.
from the get. And so that's why it's like the Winnowy is so close. But because these are women, it's like, throw them in
Yeah.
there, lock them away. It's fine.
Yeah.
Um,
I think there was a good bit of religious commentary there too, but
yeah,
we don't have to get into that.
we can talk about it a little bit if you want, but no, I agree as well. To pick something to demonize
Yeah.
and then not move from that,
Yeah.
whatever that means, whatever that may be. Religion as a power structure is something I love in my fantasy. So the Winnery was definitely a commentary on that too.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I just found the Winnery agents to be such an interesting reflection on that power structure and how they have to be a part of it. And yet, like you said, Chenlo is caught between two worlds. Like she knows
Mm-hmm.
it's not good, but it's kind of necessary because, like Noon did, if you're not taught, you can
Kill a whole lot of people.
kill a
Yeah.
whole lot of people, and
Yeah.
destruction, abound. So yeah, I don't know, I loved seeing those characters and how they interacted with
Yeah.
the world. And how, some of them are just too far gone. They've just lost. They lost the plot.
Yep.
They don't
Well,
care.
Tyranny, especially because she was discovered so late
Mm-hmm.
and just like had this whole life of trauma and being just a deeply fucked up person. Yeah. And so
Yes.
then she got into the grips of the Winnery, and they were like,
What do we
don't
do
know
with
what to
you?
do with you. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, and I think that the religious commentary as well, indoctrination, get them early, because if you get them late, you end up with a tyranny. So, who you can't control.
Yeah.
So there's just so much good commentary there, and it's subtle. Like, she doesn't spell anything out, but she trusts her readers to see what she is talking about.
Yeah.
So.
And it's not like, it's not like a one-to-one metaphor type thing. So she's not beating you over the head with anything. It's just, if you see some parallels.
Yeah,
Yeah.
see what you will see.
Right.
But yeah, Chenlo, when I think reflecting on it, Chenlo is probably one of my favorite characters.
Yeah,
Probably
she ended up
up
being
there with Vintage.
a really good character, just really well-rounded. And something I just want to say is that, like, I loved Vintage's letters in book 1. Like, I always looked forward to, like, her little, like, journal entries or whatever. And we don't get as many of them in book 2. And then I feel like that was kind of revitalized with Chenlo's journal entries, because she was such an interesting character. And then I started to really look forward to her journal entries.
I looked forward to oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, just because they were really nice. Yeah, it's in like her always looking for something good in each girl and wanting to capture memories and things about their personality before they get stuck in the hellhole of the Winnery. Like, it was nice.
Yeah, it was nice, but also I'm remembering the entries now. Also heartbreaking, because she would write about how young the girl was, who gave them up. There was one about, like, I think a 5-year-old who was like crying, and the grandma like shoved her away or something like that. And I'm like, oh my God, so it was both of those things. It was like harrowing, but also, like you said, Chenlo is determined to write down these girls' names, at least something about them before they become locked away. So doing the best in a bad situation. But you had a couple of the things, right? So
I did. I have one more question and then a couple of quick fire things. So one, would you ever want the series to be adapted? And if so, in what medium would you want it to be adapted?
Oh, I would be so nervous, because it's so complicated. If it were to be adapted, I think movie format would be better, just because usually I would go with TV shows, because then you can take your time with it, but something about the scale of this feels like a blockbuster movie to me, if it's done well. When you have like gigantic fighting war beasts in the sky and alien parasites and stuff, like that scale just seems like, if it had the right director and it had like a Hollywood budget, I think it could be really cool. And I think it would be best to do a trilogy, I think. But you could streamline, like we said, there are a couple plot lines that are just not picked up, which I think is a beautiful thing about the book, but books are naturally more ponderous than a movie is. So I think that if you cut those things that aren't circled back around to, it'd be pretty easy to make a streamlined like trilogy of movies. So that would be my dream situation, I think. I would be nervous though. I'd be nervous.
Yeah.
I mean, like a corrupted gigantic dragon on a huge screen. Give it to me, But what about you? Do you have thoughts?
I think I am with you that I would like movies, but I think I would prefer animated movies. Just because, well, a few things, but I guess the main thing is that I don't really enjoy CGI all that much, where we are in the stage of our ability to make things look realistic. Like, they never sort of quite get there for me. And I feel like with animation, you'd really be able to bring a lot of these creatures to life and make them so interesting, because it's such a imaginative world. You know, all of these worm-touched creatures and the Duralia, and I feel like with animation you'd be able to make them truly disgusting and
Mm,
or, you know, like really cool, and you'd be able to have, I mean, with animation it's all the same budget, right? So I feel like that would be my number one, but number two off the curtails of that, like a graphic novel series, because I just want to see some of this stuff. You
I
know,
think
like I want
graphic
to
novel
see
is a
it.
great idea. Like I could see these doing really
Yeah.
well in
Like, what
that
does a
format.
parasite spirit look like? Like,
Yeah.
I want to see the sparkles. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, no, no, I agree. I think visually being able to see some of this would be amazing. And
Yeah.
yeah, graphic novel would look great. Like a full color graphic novel. Ooh, I would buy that
Yeah. Me too.
immediately. Mm-mm-mm. Yeah, I think that's the winner. Adaptations make me nervous though. Like
Yeah.
one of the
Me too.
series that I want adapted the most ever is the Greenbelt Saga. I think that would make such a fantastic movie.
It.
Purpose.
I was gonna say show, because I feel like that would lean
Show would be
itself
good.
really well to being like a serialized TV
Yeah.
show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're
Mm-hmm.
right.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good one.
But
Yeah, the Greenbone Saga deserves an adaptation.
oh my god, it does. The backstabbiness, the politics, the fight scene. It's the material's already there. The writers would have
It's
to do like nothing.
yeah,
You know?
yeah, yeah. Agreed.
But so that's my answer to that question.
Okay. All right. And then just quick fire some things that we don't know that are left unanswered, and just if you have
Mm-mm.
any takes on them. All right. So one we've already talked about is like, who was the drowned one? Why
Yeah.
is she so scary? And the second one was like, did we ever go back for Mikanol? Is he still hanging out on that island? Um,
I vote yes, he is.
yeah. What do you think happened to the parasite spirits? Like, are they just still hanging out with the behemoth wreckage? Because I feel like that's a pretty
I
big
mean,
unanswered thing.
yeah. I mean, we know now that they're the memories of these war beasts now, or the souls of them. So I feel like, again, if we're looking into future, right? Now that the sap is back, maybe we'll get some pods not in wartime because the enemy is gone, right? So in a my perfect, I'm choosing to imagine that this is the case world, we can get some more pods, and
Mm-hmm.
then the fell witches are now free, and we'll slowly integrate them back into their bodies. That's what I choose to believe happened, because the idea of these spirits just wandering around,
I know, it's so sad.
and I mean like the wild touched places, right? Now that the source of this is gone, the Jubilee are gone, does it return back, or can they not be reverted back? Are they too far gone? Because I feel like the wild touched places are connected to the behemoths, right? And that's why the parasite spirits are all there. So
Yeah.
if the wild touched areas start to revert back, the parasite spirits might go out into the world, which would be a huge issue, because when they touch
Yeah.
humans go inside out, right? So we
Yeah.
got to do something about this.
Yeah.
Can't have that many of them wandering around. So like not in a localized area. So I would say, just for the world building being able to continue and make sense, I would imagine if we get more pods, they might be brought back.
That would
That's a
be the
hope.
dream scenario. Yeah. That, or they just kind of like fade back, or they get to return back to the tree
True. Maybe they go
or
back to their
something.
roots, and then
Yeah.
when they come out again, if they do, then the souls are back with their
Yeah.
god. If they could at least be returned to their god in some way, that would make me
Yeah.
happy.
So I kind of thought that, like, so in the scenario that like the fell witches absorb the war beast energy and essence and fight off the Duralia, something I had thought would be a nice touch was that if they could then give the spirit back to those like little clay animals,
Mm,
because I was
mm,
like, because that seems so significant in book one also,
mm,
that like they
mm.
were burying them to return back to Ixarel. And so I was like, oh well, what if they were able to like imbue the spirit back into clay versions, and then they could like go back to the tree.
And yet,
Yeah,
and yet Williams was like, none of that. You get
Yeah.
none of that.
None of that. What do you think happened to the unhatched war beasts? Because there was still some eggs left, I think. Do you think they ever hatched?
I had too. It's a question I had too. Now that the sap is back, I feel like if you, in the same way like the Juvelia pod affected Celephon, I feel like the sap would be able to help those war beasts like develop. So I feel like they did eventually. Again, this is just a hope. Because it's never really clear if the pod, if they're dead in the pod if they don't hatch, or they're still slumbering and they just aren't growing.
Ready
like, it's not
yet.
really clear. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if they're dead, well then they're dead. We know that Williams does not play with that that state. When something is dead, it is dead. But if they're still slumbering and the sap could restart their growth, I would imagine that they would hatch, I would think. And I would love to see what other types of creatures come out. Because we've got what? A giant bat, 2 dragons,
A fox.
A fox, and we didn't talk about him at all. What's his name again? Oh,
Hellcate.
Thank you.
He says his name like a Pokemon. Yeah.
Yeah, he's so cute. Can't believe I forgot his name because that's all he says. And then we've got a giant. Is he a panther or tiger? Panther, right?
Yeah, I think he's a panther because
Kieran
he's
is
on
a
one of
panther.
the books. And
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's a panther.
Yeah. So I would be interested to see what other creatures come out, you know? Who else we get.
Yeah.
But yeah, that would be what I would hope. What about you? Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, like I hope they hatch.
Yeah.
I was fully expecting them to, in the finale, that would be, as you said, like the cavalry, like, you know, we got some more war beasts, you know, we've got a little more ammo, but they don't. But I hope that they still, you know, do at some point, and they just get to grow up in a world without Jurelia.
Yeah, without a war that they're expected to fight. But then also, well, I guess they don't have their memories, because I was going to say, what would they do without a purpose in their mind? But if they don't have their memories, then they didn't really have that purpose to begin with, you know?
Yeah.
So it makes me want to know more about the tree god himself, though. Does he talk to the war beasts? Like, do they have a little powwow? Like, what? Is there communication going on there?
Yeah. Well, Histilian was trying to talk to him, so maybe they can
or did talk.
Kind of dreamwalk, telepathically communicate type thing. But
okay, well, these are so fun. These little one-offs. Or do you got any more? Like,
I have one more, and it's kind of obscure. So in the third book, there were some statues of women mentioned that were facing the sea. Do you remember this? Because I was thinking about it, I was like, did I actually read that, or did I just make it up?
Is that in Burns' homeland?
Yeah, I think it was in Burns' homeland, and he's like, yes, there are these mysterious statues, and nobody knows what they are or where they came from, and there are just all these women like facing the ocean. And I was like, oh, tell me more. And then we never hear about it again.
Yeah, no, I do remember that. And I remember also feeling like, oh, tell me more. But I feel like in the end that was to show, well, I'm not sure, but to show that other groups of people have other beliefs. Like, it's not all about the tree god, right? So Burns people have their own beliefs. But I did want to know what those beliefs were. Like, I was invested.
Yeah.
It did make the world feel bigger, which I appreciated, because like we hear so much about the tree god that it was nice to see someone else or another structure, possibly another belief. But yeah, I did want to know more about that. And then the woman who was in the woods in Burns' homeland, who ended up being a fell witch, who escaped the Winnowing. I thought that was cool. I wish we'd learned a little bit more about her, like how she escaped the Winnowing. She has 2 big boar, right? Wild touched boars, right? That are her,
I think so,
animal companions. What a badass. Like, I want to know more about that. Like, this fell witch that's giant boars, like just hanging out in the woods. Like, I want to know more about her story. So that was another one of those, like you said, they're one-offs that are never brought back around, but that's what's so fun about the series. Ideas.
Yeah, it makes it feel big and mysterious. Yeah.
Like there's more out there to discover. So but yeah, I loved reflecting on this story. I really did, because it's been a hot minute since I've read it. I finished it, the Poison Song, in February, I think. So it's been a couple months, but I loved having this discussion with you and being able to reflect on all of the little things that I enjoyed again, because it reminded me why I love the series so much. Do you find upon reread, like, now that you know what's coming, are you paying attention to different things? Or
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've never reread something so close to having finished it already before. And so it is really interesting to have so many things being fresh and like seeing, you know, little puzzle pieces being established so early on. And yeah, getting to see like the foreshadowing and just like, it's cool.
yeah.
So
Yeah. I think that Williams knew where she was going with it, for sure, from the beginning. And she put a lot of red herrings in there. But yeah, it's a series that I would love to reread one day. You know, there are some series that I'm afraid to reread because I'm like, oh, will it hold up? But I have a feeling this series is going to hold up. Like, it's going to be a favorite, I think, for the rest of my life, just because of how much I enjoyed every element of it. So yeah, I'm going to be screaming about this.
Me too.
For a long time. Full 5-star series. I mean, have you inspired anyone else to read it yet?
I am trying. Probably for Christmas, a few people are going to be getting The Ninth Reign. I'm trying to hawk it to just like anybody who will listen. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because I feel like there's such a small group of us, but all of us love it. So it's like we need to get it into other hands. I have had a couple comments on like my best books video of people being like, well, now I have to pick up The Ninth Reign. I'm like, yes, my life is that's my job in life now, you know? So
Yeah. Yeah, but did you come back and tell me, did you read
exactly.
it?
I need feedback. I need to talk about this with someone, because I mentioned to you earlier that this is the first time I've been able to, or gotten to, one of those, talk to someone who has read the whole series and just gush about it in this way. Because I want it to get big enough that like there are some people there are some people that don't like it and some people that do like it. I want it to reach that level of readership. That's the word I'm looking for. So, because then we can have debates about it.
Because I do think there's a lot of things to debate about. And I think there are things that people may not like, especially overthinkers, I think, or people who are really honed in on like the plot having to make complete sense all of the time. Like, I think there are nitpicks people could make.
Oh, for sure. I mean, the thing is, we've been open about that, you know, this whole chat. So it's just like you either like what she's doing with it or you don't.
Yeah.
So I think there is a lot to debate there, because she knows what she wanted to do with it, and she did that, you know.
Yeah.
It's kind of the way that I feel about. She did do that. It's the way I feel about like there's this one Spiffo read that I did where it's like so unapologetically what it is for Spiffo 9, Cold West. Like whenever I talk about that book, I'm like, it wasn't for me, but who it's for, it's going to be so for, because he knew what he was doing with that. And I feel like Williams kind of has the same vibe. She's like, this is what I want to do. You can take it or you can leave it. So on that note, we have talked about the series for almost 2 hours now.
Thank you. Goodness.
Thank you for being so generous with your time and joining me on this chat. And if you want to, just before we leave, maybe any last thoughts, any sign-offs that you would like to do, let the people watching this know where they can find you.
Well, you can find me at Bookish Blackwell on YouTube. I have an Instagram of the same name, though I am not very active on it. And yeah, I do the typical booktube stuff, wrap-ups, TBRs, book hauls, that kind of thing.
Yes, Aubrey's channel will be linked down below. I love her videos. I'm just saying, if you watch my videos and you like the vibes and what I read, go watch her videos. They're so aesthetic, like your background. Your mic is also awesome. You're criminally underrated in the booktube space. So please go check out Aubrey's channel. She had a really interesting discussion video recently about like why reading is so competitive, and I thought that you had some really interesting points in that discussion video. So
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll have her link down below. Go check her out. If you're watching this and you discovered this because you also love the Winnowing Flame, not sure who I am. My name is Taylor. This channel is Made Between the Pages. You can see behind me a lot of similar tastes, to this series, sci-fi. I read epic fantasy. I do book reviews. I also live in Japan, so I have a lot of vlogs about living in Japan and reading. So if that sounds interesting to you, you can stick around. But if you're watching this and you only watch the first part, the non-spoiler part, thank you for watching the video. We really hope that we were able to convince you to pick up the series and give it a shot. And maybe the weirdness and the uniqueness of the series will be exactly what you're looking for. So highly recommend just picking it up and giving it a shot. If you're watching this all the way through because you've already read the series, whether you loved it or you didn't love it so much, I'd love to hear in the comments down below your thoughts on it. Just, disagree with us, debate with us if you want, agree with us. Like, clearly we're desperate to talk about the series with people. So would absolutely love to hear your thoughts. But I think that's going to conclude our chat for today. I think that's about it. So thank you for joining us, and we'll both see you in our next videos on our channels. Bye.
Bye.